I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. However, I didn't live there very long. I'm I'm the um, third of four children that my parents had. Um, I was preceded by an older brother and sister. My older brother has passed away, but my sister is living in St. Louis now. In any case, I also have a younger brother who is a physician. He's a retired physician. He lives in Kansas City. And that's where I was raised. I was raised in Kansas City after my father, who worked for the Associated Press for 40 years, he was transferred from Milwaukee to Chicago. And hence, after a couple of years in Chicago, when I was a child, we ended up in Kansas City. And so I was really raised in Kansas City, and that's where my early youth, my that's where I was raised. Having had um, a, uh, a primary school education, high school education, and after high school, I attended the Kansas City Art Institute, which is a pretty well-known institution and has very good facilities. It's now part of the University of Missouri at Kansas City, and have extensive grounds there and facilities. In any case, not having been a very good student scholastically in high school, I gravitated toward to the arts actually really very early on, and spent a lot of time drawing and drawing all kinds of, as children do, very often weird things. But I also had some exposure to the Nelson Art Gallery, which is a major art institution in the Midwest and in Kansas City. And I didn't go there for lessons as some children did. I have a very good friend who recently died who used to go there for art lessons, and he became a famous painter. And I've been in touch with him for many years, Robert Morse. In any case, I attended the grade school and then high school, Paseo High School, and then the Kansas City Art Institute. However, my art ambitions were interrupted by the Korean War. And rather than, as I often have pointed out, draft boards were interested in getting artists into foxholes. And I was determined not to end up that way, so I joined the Navy. And that was a fortuitous condition because the North Koreans had no Navy at all, so we had no conflict or combat with them. And so I ended up in Korean and Japanese waters for a whole tour of duty that consisted of 4 years of being back and forth between the United States, San Diego, and Japan. And during that time, of course, I had no time to pursue my art interests. However, on one occasion when I was in San Diego, I did attend the Coronado School of Fine Arts for a very brief period. And at that time, they happened to have a competition for an annual officers' ball at the Hotel del Coronado, and they had a competition for an advertisement for that ball, and I participated and I won the competition. And so my poster and was on exhibit there at the ball, and which incidentally I didn't attend. I don't know why. I probably was on the ship that had duty at that time, but in any case, I didn't do that. And so during my tour of the Navy, which was a 4-year length of a 4-year period, I also decided that after having been in Japan and visited a famous project that Frank Lloyd Wright designed in 1922, the Imperial Hotel. And I was very impressed with that building. And suddenly I had the inspiration that I was going to be an architect. And so I developed another mindset, architecture being a related art to painting and drawing and so on. I thought that I would excel in that profession. So I was determined to become an architect, and in order to do so, having always been very poor in mathematics, I decided that I better brush up and get a course in algebra, which I took at the while I was on the ship, and it was a correspondence course out of the University of Wisconsin. In any case, I became an accomplished expert in algebra. And by the time I was discharged, 4 years after I had joined, and determined to become an architect, I went back to Kansas City and applied to various architectural schools. Well, among those that accepted me was the Washington University in St. Louis. And so that's where I ended up getting my architectural education. So I graduated in 1960 and also got married in the same year. My wife is from Turkey and we were married in Izmir. And she's engaged in her own studies, and although she's a chemist by training, academic training, she's always been interested in language and specifically in Judeo-Espanol, which she is an expert at and one of the world leaders in that language. In any case, I spend a lot of time here in my studio with either watercolor or acrylic painting. I don't do sculpture, although I had a sculpture teacher in Kansas City when I was attending who was determined that I should become a sculptor. Ross Winter thought that I would be a great sculptor, and so but that, as I said, that was all abruptly cut short after 2 years when I had to joined the Navy. And so I ended up becoming an architect. I graduated in 1960. I excelled in drawing, which happened to be a big bonus. So my studies in art school didn't go entirely to waste. And that supplemented my abilities in architecture. And after my graduation, I had a professor of architecture who was from Holland. He had a large firm in Holland, and he taught at the school for 6 months. And I was very impressed with him. His name was Bakema, Jacob Bakema, and he had a firm, Fundenbroek and Bakema, in Rotterdam. And I asked if I could become a member of that firm. And he agreed to that. And after some negotiations, and after our marriage with my wife, and incidentally, we were married in Izmir, Turkey. And that's her hometown. So I met her entire family, and we stayed there for a couple of months until after we were married. And then I went to Holland and I worked there for 2 years doing architectural projects for not only in Holland, but also in Europe, primarily housing projects. But along with the development of those projects, I did a lot of drawing, and I have many sketches of my having supplemented the work that I was doing there with drawings that accompany that. And I was greatly appreciated by my employers there in Rotterdam. And so after 2 years in Holland, we decided that we were going to move to Israel, and that's what we did. My wife was very strongly in favor of doing that, and so in 1962 we moved to Israel, and we lived in Israel for a couple of years, and I worked for various architects in Israel doing various kinds of projects, and one of which was published in L'Architecture d'Aujourd'hui, a French magazine. But after 2 years, we decided to come back to the United States. And so we ended up again in Kansas City. And by this time, we had 2 children. And so we began to raise them in Kansas City. And then I got an offer to teach at Washington University. And so that's precisely what I did. I took up a teaching position. So we moved to St. Louis, and we lived there for 17 years. However, I only taught for 2 years, and then I continued working in the architectural profession for Helmuth About and Kassebaum, also known as HOK. I worked for them for 17 years and did any number of all kinds of projects, all of which were supplemented by drawings that I had that I was very committed to and accompanying the projects that I did. So I continued working for HOK, and then I got an offer from Gio Obata, who's the design head of the firm. He suggested that we move to San Francisco to the firm there. So we packed our bags, sold our house, and moved to San Francisco. We didn't live in San Francisco. We ended up living in Oakland. So we lived there for 6.5 years. And I worked for HOK during that period and did all kinds of projects. And I won't go into that. But I then got an offer to move to Dallas and to work for another architectural firm called HDR. It used to be known as Henningsen, Durham, and Richardson. Now it's just known as HDR. It's a large architectural and engineering firm nationwide, and it has offices in Dallas. So I ended up accepting a position in Dallas, and that's what brought me to Dallas. And that's where we have been for the past 31 years. And so after we settled down here, I decided that I would, we bought a lot and built a house. I designed a house and actually a duplex, and we live in half of it. And I subsequently in 2008, after I retired, the year I retired, I decided to build an addition, a studio, and that's what you see behind me is a studio addition that I added on to our existing house. And so I spend quite a bit of time here doing acrylic painting and doing watercolor. I'm a member of the Southwest Watercolor Society here in Dallas, and I attend their meetings and exhibitions. And I also enter the North Dallas Artist Studio Tour, which takes place periodically. During the pandemic, of course, has been suspended, but it will take place again soon. So I'm active in different artistic endeavors. I currently have a painting at the Oak Cliff Cultural Center. I periodically get calls to display work, and I had an exhibition just recently of quite a few paintings and a one-man show. And so I seek opportunities to display my work. And the gist of my work is primarily focused on social commentary. I would put it that way. So behind you, you see a number of things that would suggest that. And so this is what I do. I have a website It's simple to access, www.bernardbortnick.com,
Mhm.
and for those who are interested. And I also display now and then. So I do watercolor and acrylic. I like the water media because it's simple, easy cleanup, and it's very effective. And acrylic paint dries immediately, as opposed to watercolor, which takes forever to dry, and you have to keep working into it. So frankly, I haven't done an oil painting since 1962. I have one oil painting that's left from my years at the Kansas City Art Institute, and that's hanging in our house. But other than that, that is about that gives you an overview of what I've been
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah.
Art is a medium of expression, and it depends upon what you have bouncing around in your head as to what you want to express. Some people are inclined to a more romantic vision. I am not. I have a critical outlook on the social scene, and so my work tends to be to dwell on that aspect of our lives and on the condition of the country and of people. And so you can now, for example, this painting that I have here, what does that suggest to you? Well, it's pretty clear there's a tangled network of freeway, and that these are abominations. These freeways and the whole, as far as I'm concerned, the whole auto thing is an abomination. Um, and so I look at the automobile industry, and as much as we all need one or two, we happen to have two, as a very negative aspect of human life. And so to emphasize that, the freeways that we have are really weird. And the one that I'm making a painting of shows just exactly how tangled and idiotic they can be. And this is just taken for granted by a lot of people. They use them, I use them, but they're terrifying. And there is a famous Renaissance perspectivist painter, or he wasn't really a painter, he was a graphic, an extremely accomplished graphic artist. His name was Piranesi, and he did some extremely elaborate drawings. He always did drawings on plates and published these things. He did these drawings on copper plates and then made prints from them. They were very popular with the English nobility who made trips to Europe and to especially into Italy. So he made a good living out of selling these prints of dilapidated images of Rome, of ancient Rome, the ruins of Rome. And the English and other sources in Europe, the aristocracy, loved these images because they were very nostalgic and gave an impression of sort of a romantic idea of how things were. But in any case, the Piranesi would love our scrambled highway systems and overpasses and so on, because that's just the kind of thing he excelled in, making drawings of things like that. In any case, I'm also intrigued by that the images and the forms that that come about as a result of the automobile. So I have a few paintings on the automobile thesis, and so I don't think that these could be considered beautiful paintings, or necessarily, the painting can be beautiful, but the subject is not particularly beautiful. And so it's an ugly subject, beautifully rendered. That's my aspiration in any case. So my style is, I once described it as how would it be described? Well, I don't recall what the descriptive term I used. There is a lot of, I do a lot of figurative work, and it's somewhat stylized. And I had a term for it that was, but I don't recall. In any case, I do a lot of figurative work, yes, and with a emphasis on social aspects of life. So that's basically as close as I can get to describing my style. Some of my heroes in painting are Daumier and Goya. Goya is the greatest. And he was a great painter, but other than his painting works, his graphic work was really very compelling and very good. A commentary about his times, and about not only his times, but about the human condition. And so what style would you describe it? It was, it couldn't be exactly called realism, but it was figurative work that described social conditions. And so if you're familiar with Goya's work, he was great. Another great is Daumier, who was a French artist. He was also primarily a graphic artist, although he did some oil paintings. But he lived after his mature development took place after Goya, and he was a Frenchman. So I do watercolors as well. Watercolor is a different kind of medium, of course, than acrylic. Acrylic is you can go over it again and again and correct things, and it's opaque. Watercolor is has to be very spontaneous, as I see it. Although some people who are watercolorists labor over their watercolors and do it very carefully, but that's not the way I view watercolor. I'm more of a supporter of John Marin, who develops a very spontaneous, used to develop very spontaneous work. Very fresh. Once it's down, once it's put down on a paper, he leaves it and goes on to the next stroke, brush stroke. And so it's very definite and very definitive. In any case, that's primarily what I do in watercolor. And I have some of those, and I'll have those. I do quite a few landscape works in watercolor, and watercolor is very amenable for landscape painting, much more so than, say, acrylic, although you can do acrylic paintings, and I have done landscape acrylic paintings. Oh. No, it doesn't. I don't really have any Jewish themes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really interested in religion, or any religion,
Okay.
except academically.
Right.
And so I don't believe, or I don't have a strong desire to do anything like that. However, I have done some things that have to do with the oppression of the Nazis. Since my grandmother and grandfather and aunt were murdered in Auschwitz, my grandfather took his own life in Paris, but I have a strong desire to do depictions, and I started doing some things like that on that theme, but I can only carry it to a certain point. And unless you have been, there are artists who have gone through that horror of the camps and the Nazi regime, that painted and drew depictions of that. But I could never measure up to their emotional level of commitment to do anything that really had any strong strong development on that theme. I have a couple of paintings that I've done that I wanted to give to the Holocaust Center, but I've shown them to them, and I will eventually do that. But that's primarily where I'm at on that account. Don't use color in a naturalistic way, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
It's I do the color as purely an emotional aspect of the painting. In other words, and compositionally, as an item that contributes to the message of the painting. The color I try to on some of the paintings that I do, I try to evoke a mood based upon the weather or the atmosphere that exists at the time and when whatever I'm doing, and without pointing out specifically to something, I can't I can talk to that, but let me see if I can. Now here's a painting.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that that man,
Yeah.
who is indigent, sleeping on the steps or trying to sleep on the steps and in a very uncomfortable position. Well, he's a black man, and that where he's sleeping at, there is a number on the, as though it's an address, and the number is 1863. Well, that's the Emancipation Proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. And so that is a commentary as to where that man is relative to emancipation. He's emancipated to misery and to poverty. That's his emancipation. So I don't have much to say about that one, but here's one over here, for example. Let's see. I saw this image. I saw this when I was in Chicago. I got on the L, and there were two women there that were having lunch on the train. In as much as it said no food on the train, they were having a McDonald's festival. And the mother was overweight and the daughter was on her way to being overweight. And just above, there's a sign that says, "I'm loving it," which is a McDonald's sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, well, that's the kind of thing I do. Here's a painting that is nothing more than the image of a window and a fishbowl. And so this paintings is more or less, and you can see by the coloration, the walls are not really blue, but I took the liberty of making them that way because I felt that the painting required that coloration. Well, the fishbowl is like, see what I call this? That's actually in New York. It's called Henry Street Fishbowl. And that's what these apartments, many of these apartments are like. It's like living in a fishbowl. Way up on top, you'll notice there's a painting of an indigent man who is hustling for handouts and passing cars. And so that's called overpass. So that's the kind of thing I do. I have, watercolors that I do here, and I also have watercolors of images, nature, landscapes. Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't given it much thought. However, I am going to give you a good sample both of the landscape as well as the social commentary. And specifically, that's the kind of thing I plan to send over to you. What I'd like to for people to take away is the notion that there is there are issues out there that need to be addressed. And when I say out there, I mean in society, and that's what I try to do in my paintings. And so that would be my primary interest. You can't be too literal about these kinds of things. I have a friend who's an internationally known artist. He recently died. He has a number of books that were published on his work. And they're all different and all have different themes. For years, he did, among other things, he did what you call mazes, or you wander through not exactly knowing where you're going, and panels that are set up in different ways. And he has one on the lawn of the Nelson Art Gallery in Kansas City. It's all glass, and you wander through this thing, and he could never really explain exactly what his intent was. And so it's entirely up to the viewer as to what they experience, what their experience is. And I think that very much, that's not my intent, though. I have specific symbols and clues, if you want to call it that are pretty obvious as to what my work is about, and what I'm trying to say in the painter's medium. And so that's what I try to convey. Art, of course, is it's tried to say as a medium of expression. And so what are you expressing? Well, you're expressing your perceptions of what the world is like out there. And so that's really what my work, I think, is all about.